You're listening to the 40 Fit Radio podcast, dedicated to the 40-plus community. Join us as we discuss the truth about fitness and health using science, reason, and the experiences of our host and content experts. Welcome to the 40 Fit Nation. Hey guys, welcome back to 40 Fit Radio and welcome back to the 40 Fit Nation. I'm your host, Coach D, along with...
It's me, Coach Trent.
Coach Trent and co-host. And we also have a very special guest today, a friend and colleague. She is a doctor of physical therapy, Dr. Michelle Baker. And you also have your most recent educational endeavor. Is that women's health specialty too?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you have a DPT and also did kind of a little specialty area?
Yes, a certification. A certification in women's health, advanced women's health.
All right, cool. Now, is that part of the APTA program, women's health program?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes.
Cool. I don't have very many women's health issues, so that's not an area where I usually have to go.
And women's health is not just for women.
Great. She's going to go into some conversation we do not want to have today. So,
Darren, I think you need to get in touch with your inner self.
No. I touch my inner self all the time. I've had lots of exams, and I don't mean that in a wrong way. But okay, so today we're here to talk about, I love Michelle and what she stands for. She's been one of our doctors of physical therapy at one of our clinics and has worked part-time for us for about 2 years. Maybe? Yeah, about 2 years. And she's a full-time mom too. She got 4 kiddos. And recently just decided that taking care of kiddos was more important right now, which kudos to you because it's a very important job. Michelle, my wife, did that for years with our children, and no better place for a learned, leadership-oriented female to be than raising her kids and raising productive, hopefully males and females that will eventually enter modern society, or at least that's kind of the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
Or just try to not let them kill themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or others.
Or each other.
Yeah, exactly. Or each other. Yeah. So we're having you on the show today to talk generally about your athletic background, you personally, what it's like to be a master's aged female. You're 45 years old, but you're in unbelievable shape. You look like you're in great shape. And I know this last year you did some really cool things in the endurance arena with running some races. We're going to talk about that. But let's talk a little bit about you personally first. You're married?
I am married.
How long you been married?
For 24 years.
24 years. Are you a native? You're not native Texan.
No, my husband and I both grew up in Alaska.
Yeah, and you could tell that because she drives a Subaru. No, I'm just joking. We've had jokes. She and I have talked about that before. Everyone in the northern states, Montana, not Montana, but Oregon, Washington, Colorado. My daughter drives a Subaru,
right.
But she's a smart person. She drives Subarus. Those cars are for smart people.
I'm definitely not smart enough to drive a Subaru.
No, exactly.
That's why I drive a Honda.
Yeah, Honda's pretty smart too. But so you grew up in Alaska?
I grew up in Alaska.
What part?
In the Anchorage area.
Okay. And so when did you move to Texas?
We moved to Texas in 1998.
Okay. Husband's in the oil industry? Or?
Yes, he's an oil and gas geologist.
That's what I thought. So this is a great place to live. Alaska's not a bad place to live for that too, but this is a better place?
Well, we never thought we'd be here this long. We thought, we'll go to Texas for 2 or 3 years and then move back home. But that never happened. So
this is home now, pretty much? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-oh. All right. We'll leave that conversation for later. So went to PT school. When did you Okay. So you have a bachelor's or a master's in PT?
I have a master's degree.
When did you graduate with your master's?
1999.
Okay. And then you recently got your doctorate several years ago.
Yes.
And did you go to TWU? Is that right?
Yes, Texas Women's.
Okay. When did you graduate with your doctorate?
2017.
Okay. So I thought. And I think I heard you just really close thereafter. You had just finished your program.
Yes.
Then we hired you after that. So, okay, cool. So she's been working in one of our clinics, mostly as an orthopedic therapist, but, in small clinics like we have, we see just about everything. So if a neuro patient comes in or an ortho patient or if a women's health patient comes in, you see pretty much what walks in the door. So she's been working for us. And tell me a little bit about your athletic background. So we talked about this earlier a little bit. You were not an athlete growing up necessarily?
Well, I was an athlete.
Okay, so
yes.
Tell us about that.
So growing up, I started running probably in third grade. My school had a cross-country program, and we had one big citywide meet for all the elementary kids. But then I got to middle school and high school, and I stopped doing distance running. I did track still, but I did the sprints, I did high jump, I did pole vaulting, that kind of thing. More of the power end of track.
Yeah. What was your sprint distance mostly? What did you run mostly?
The 100, 200.
It's perfect. I actually think that development of power and explosive speed probably benefited you in your running career long term, because you had the muscle mass potentially as you got a little bit older of a sprinter, of a power athlete, not the muscle mass of a runner. We can always convert you into more running longer distance when you have this great muscle mass, and then develop your aerobic or cardiorespiratory function.
Sure.
So, all right, went in through high school doing that?
Well, I did that, and my big thing in high school was basketball.
Okay.
I played basketball through high school. Cool. So, but then I got off to college, and I went to college on an academic scholarship instead of going to a smaller school on a basketball scholarship. And so I didn't have a regular physical fitness thing.
Yeah.
And so in college, I started rock climbing.
Oh, cool.
And I
Very
spent 8 years rock climbing in the mountains of Utah and traveling around the Southwest area.
It's a good place to do it. Yeah.
Cool. So you have some upper body strength that probably the average runner doesn't have, and some upper back, and obviously hand and wrist, grip strength and finger strength, intrinsics, extrinsics, the whole, probably that the average runner doesn't even develop because they don't do that kind of sport. They don't do that kind of training. So,
yeah, your average endurance runner certainly.
Yeah. Doesn't do that. They might climb. I think a lot of runners are into other fitness endeavors, especially if they're more natural runners. They do trail running, things like that. They like to do stuff like climbing and do bouldering, things like that, But I would say your average urban dwelling runner, or suburban runner would never get into that kind of discipline necessarily.
We're not doing a whole lot of climbing in DFW.
No. There are some good places to climb outside of here, but they're.
I climb fences from time to time.
It's
about as high as I go,
especially with sirens following you. That's not the same thing, Trent. That's kind of awkward.
It is high intensity interval training though.
Sprinting. Yeah. All right. So climbing background, basketball, sprinting and track background. You've stayed in really, really good shape. And let's talk about what you've done in your more recent years, and that is long distance running, doing running. So how long have you been running again competitively or for local races and being an avid runner?
Well, I started running for fitness my second year of physical therapy school was when I started running on a regular basis.
Late 90s-ish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When my husband moved to Texas, and I still had a year left of school in Utah.
Wow.
And so I had a lot of free time.
No kids at the time?
No kids.
Okay, right.
So I just started running.
Yeah.
And then when I moved down to Houston, I just was doing 5Ks, that kind of thing. And not breaking any speed records or anything. And then after I had my third child, my sister said, I'm thinking about running this half marathon out here in Southern California. She lived in Orange at the time. Why don't you come run it with me?
All right.
Yeah. And at the time, we were thinking about having a fourth kid. So I said, well, if I'm not pregnant by this time, then I'll do it.
Yeah.
So I did.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That was your first longer distance race. Mm-hmm. Okay, half marathon. All right. Do you remember your time in that race, or what your average per mile was?
It was like 9.
Okay.
Something. I came in just under 2 hours.
Okay, that's still legit. That's still a reasonably fast half marathon. So, okay, cool. In the 9s. All right, good. So, what have you done since then? How many marathons have you done?
Let's see. Boston was, I think, 17.
Okay, and you just did. Well, we can't skip all the way to Boston. So you did a half marathon, and then did you do some more halves?
I did. I did another half a couple of months later, and I just kept doing halves for a little while, and then the second half I did. Then I found out I was pregnant.
Okay.
So
okay. Kind of curtailed training for a while.
Curtailed training a little bit. I still ran through the whole pregnancy.
Wow.
Like I ran the day before I had him.
Wow.
So.
Wow. How big was he?
He was 7.5 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like carrying a very large smaller medicine ball on your belly
Right.
while running. I can't imagine that, Wow, that's like Tina, Dr. Tina. She's amazing. She was CrossFitting and lifting way late. I think within 2 weeks of her pregnancy, she was back squatting and doing pull-ups and just crazy. But that just goes to show you that, and she had very high-risk pregnancies too. And yet the doctor said, hey, keep exercising. Whatever you're doing is helping you, to have a healthier, lower risk pregnancy. So, wow. So then after that, you had your fourth child.
So I had my fourth child and did a 10K 3 months later.
Wow.
And then I decided to try and do a marathon the following winter.
Okay.
So,
cool.
My husband and I trained together.
Okay.
And he is not a runner, but he decided that he would do this with me.
Wow, that's pretty brave.
And
Michelle, I'm not going to do that. Okay, I'm just letting you know I'm not going to do that. Sorry.
Yeah. So our first marathon was the Cowtown.
Oh yeah, it's a great race, local race, big race. Probably two biggest races in Dallas Fort Worth would be the Cowtown, and then the one in Dallas. They call it the BMW something now, the BMW Dallas Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a Dallas thing.
Yeah,
the BMW.
Yeah, see,
26 points
in Fort Worth. It's the Cowtown. Cowboys in the Cowtown.
Right, yes, the Cowtown Marathon.
Yeah, Cowtown Marathon. But in Dallas, it's the BMW. Yeah, but those are the two biggest races probably in town. So how'd you do in that race?
Well, I survived.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I had gotten a cold or something, I can't remember, a week or two before.
Yeah.
And so I was coming off of a respiratory disease.
Which is kind of classic with marathoners, right? People that train a lot of long, slow distance, that train a lot of miles. You were probably at your peak mileage right before that. You were doing a lot of time on the ground. Your body's immune system is stressed. You're also trying to watch your weight, trying to watch your nutrition, make sure you don't gain any weight before the race. You're just trying to keep everything dialed in. You're also stressed out mentally. You know that you got this race coming up. It's your first marathon. So you probably were a little nervous. And you add all that stuff together. And I find it common that endurance athletes, longer distance endurance athletes that run, these long, slow distance type modalities, a lot of times will have things like colds and flus and respiratory infections and things that you wouldn't expect a real healthy athlete to have, but they have them, and they generally have them as their mileage gets higher. Your immune system just gets wrecked, So after that, you've run a bunch of marathons since then, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like 16 more.
Right.
So I'm curious how that experience from going from the half marathon to the full marathon was like. So my one endurance experience in life was I ran a half marathon, and it was my only long distance race I ever did. And we spent a long time, and I ran it super slow. Like you said, you were running in the 9s. I think I was running like a 10-minute mile pace. But I felt like when I ran the half marathon, I didn't feel so bad at the end. I felt like I had some miles to go, but I didn't feel like I had 13 more miles in the tank, but I certainly had some more miles in the tank. So what was that like going from the half marathons to the full marathon? Was it a different experience?
It was brutal. Yeah. It took me 4.5 hours to run my first marathon.
So it's double the time for one thing.
Yeah. It took me more than double the time. And honestly, I probably it was about mile 12 that I started really hitting it hard. And if my husband hadn't been running it with me, I don't know if I would have finished.
Do you think it was a mental thing, or just kind of pacing yourself and conserving your energy? Or
Yeah, obviously a lot of it is mental. I would say marathoning is probably 90% mental.
Okay, yeah.
So feeling like crap and just dragging. Yeah. It was hard.
Pushing through that point.
Yeah.
So I remember this experience, and it was unique to me because, again, I'd never really done any endurance training before this experience. This was back in college, by the way. But sometime, and I didn't feel it every time, but when I would do the longer runs around, let's say, mile 8 or 9, it kind of hit this limbo sort of feeling where you don't feel great. It's not necessarily like a runner's high like you hear about sometimes, but it's more of just kind of like you hit this. It's like the engine just starts running smoothly, and you can just keep going. As long as nothing disturbs that equilibrium you've hit, you can just kind of keep going forever. Was that kind of the thing that you felt at some point, is that you had you reached the end of that equilibrium point, or were you able to push past and find that? Or
I don't know that I ever hit that in that first marathon. That's the point that I call like the Zen point of
Zen
running.
point. Yeah, that's a good
where
way to put it. Yeah.
Sort of your eyes are just, traveling along in space, but they don't seem to be connected to the rest of your body.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
Well, at some point, as long as you're appropriately fueling along the way, you do reach this state of homeostasis. At some point, that's going to crash. I mean, you're not going to be able to do that forever. But as long as your speed doesn't significantly increase or significantly decrease, you find that sweet spot, that kind of steady state cardiovascularly where you're fueling and oxygenating enough and your respiratory system's keeping up, your stroke volume, all those cardiac functions, you're transporting enough fuel to the cells, and you just kind of stay in that state. It's when the hardest thing about that is finding that state and recognizing it personally when you're in it. I've done that a couple times on triathlons. Actually on shorter distance triathlons where you're like, okay, I can maintain this pace right here. Just stay right here. But that can't be too slow too if you want to be competitive. It's when we start dialing it up or turning up the speed or whatever the sport is that it becomes problematic. It becomes very difficult. And I think that's where most runners struggle is finding where's their lactate threshold. You don't want to bump into it to where now you're in a deficit, you're just dying. And then guess what you have to do? You have to dial way back. You can't just tweak it down a little bit. So.
Right. So what did your training look like as you were preparing for your first marathon and then future marathons after that? How did your training differ from running the halves?
Well, my training in the last couple of years has changed significantly from when I first started training for marathons. But when I went from half to a full, it was mainly just adding on mileage.
Just more miles?
Just more miles, But I would really keep my mileage during the week not that different. I mean, my runs would be, 5 to 7 miles and then do a long run on the weekend.
Sure.
But as I've progressed through, a number of marathons, I got to probably my fourth marathon, and I decided I would start trying to qualify for Boston.
Okay.
So then I added in some more speed work. I would look online and try to find training programs and that sort of thing. I struggled, though. I actually didn't qualify for Boston until my 8th marathon.
Okay. So was the main issue getting your speed, your times down?
It was being able to maintain that over the distance.
Sure.
And a lot of it, I think, came down to nutrition, too.
What was your required time, your qualifying time? Your average, what did your average need to be?
Which time?
Well, when you first qualified. Because as you age, it gets lower.
Right.
I
like to say I aged into it.
No, you smoked this last one. I mean, you definitely smoked the last one. But what was your first required time? Do you remember?
I think my first one I had to run in a 3:40.
Okay.
3:45, something like that.
And that's the one that you didn't make, the very first one.
That was my goal.
Oh, okay.
That was the goal.
Got it.
I had to hit 3:45 for my age to qualify for Boston.
Gotcha. Got it.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty significant. So that's 45 minutes you had to shave off your first marathon time. So
Yeah. So my first 3 marathons were probably 4.5 hours or so. But my third one was a trail marathon, so you expect that to be a lot slower.
Yeah, you can't take that.
Yeah. So my fourth one, I tried to qualify, and I came in under 4 hours.
Okay. Yeah.
So I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
So tell me about how you tweaked your nutrition during this period.
A lot of it is hydrating, and I didn't realize how much you have to hydrate ahead of time.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
So as you're carb loading, you're also just chugging water for 2 days before the marathon because you can't drink that much in the race.
Right. Yeah. There's just the logistics of it. You've got a bunch of water sloshing around in your belly. That's miserable.
Well,
right?
it's that, and also that, what's it called? Hypernatremia or something that,
If you overhydrate, you
you
get
just
sick.
can't overhydrate during the race.
Sure.
You feel
yeah.
like you need more water, but the problem is you're drinking more than you actually need if
I
you're
guess
not careful.
Yeah.
Right.
That electrolyte balance gets thrown off. Right. Yeah.
Right. And then I would have problems with cramping and that sort of thing in my legs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So you change your nutrition. How much protein do you get in your diet?
I have no idea.
No.
No.
Okay. Are you a meat eater? I don't know.
I do eat meat.
Okay, you do. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if you were a vegan or a meat eater. Okay, cool. So common meat sources would be what? Chicken, fish.
We eat, well, being from Alaska, we eat
Okay.
a lot of halibut
Okay, cool. Good, great.
and like ground turkey, that
Yeah,
sort of thing.
okay.
If I'm making things, I try to use leaner things.
Cool.
Like
cool.
turkey. We don't eat a lot of red meat.
Eggs.
I eat eggs every day.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Excellent source of protein and
And
good
bacon.
fats. Yeah, bacon's good too. Yeah, we don't eat a lot of red meat, but we eat a lot of bacon.
I eat bacon.
What's up with that? I think bacon's like. I think if you had to pick, America's mascot, it would be bacon.
Bacon.
It would be the pig.
Oh, yeah.
It would
Oh,
be
yes.
the pig. No, it wouldn't even be the pig. It'd be bacon. The mascot would actually
Yeah.
be bacon. We just put legs on it.
Just bacon. Yeah.
But we also talked a little bit about, okay, first of all, Michelle is really mild-mannered, really easygoing, and she's not going to say, a whole lot about her accomplishments, but you crushed this last marathon. You went to Boston. You ran this marathon. How much fast? Okay, what did you run this last marathon in this last year?
I ran it in a 3:34.
3:34. What was your prior time?
My fastest marathon was a 3:27.
Okay, and what was your
3:23. I can't remember. It's
what was
3:20
your
something.
prior Boston?
Oh, my prior Boston was 3:57 or 8.
Okay, so were you a year older? Was that the Boston
It
before?
was 1 year before.
Okay, and I know weather takes a toll on some of those things, and I know this year was you had a really good environment to run in. The weather was good for you, you said, and the surroundings were good, or the circumstances were good. But what's the difference? Did you do something different than your training other than hydration and a little bit of difference in nutrition? What else was different?
Speed work.
Okay, all right, so more interval type stuff?
I did 2 days of speed work a week
Okay.
and implemented a lot more strength training.
Oh, there is the golden nugget I was looking for. I love that.
Darren, how dare you ask leading questions on this podcast?
No. But I mean, plain and simple, when you look at Michelle, when you see her in a pair of shorts or you see her in her running pictures, she's got muscular legs. You're not small. You're not big by any means, but you're not small. If you how tall are you? About 5'7"?
Yeah, 5'7", 5'8",
Yeah, what do you weigh? Do you mind me asking?
140.
Okay, so 5'7", 5'8" at 140. You're not a big female, but you're not a small female. I know a lot of runners that are your height that are 125, and they're 120, you know.
My lowest weight has been
Yeah.
like 134.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you look more muscular than the average runner, and your legs and your hips and just your development of your legs and your hips and your upper body too is you just have more muscle mass than some runners. Now, I know there are runners out there that are a little bit bigger, but just muscularly wise. But you and I talked a little bit about using strength training and just in passing, using strength training as a way to, number one, give you better times and better speed, and then doing some more interval work. And then lastly, the risk and injury prevention that strength training gives you by developing better connective tissue, better muscular tie-ins. You just have a more stable structural makeup. And you and I know as doctors of PT that, the more muscle mass you have on board, within reason. I mean, we can't make you, we don't want to make you look like a bodybuilder, but with a reasonable amount of lean mass on board, you're going to control valgus at the knee, a lot of the problems that you run into because you just get fatigued early on because you just don't have a good strength foundation or base. And so you said you did great in this marathon. You felt very healthy.
I felt amazing.
Felt strong.
Yeah.
Amazing's pretty good.
Yeah.
that's
Amazing's good. So,
I mean, normally after a marathon, you're just wiped.
Yeah.
You're just wiped. But I'm like walking around waiting at the finish line for my sister to finish, you know.
Yeah, and you just PR'd by like 20 some odd minutes.
All these people are asking me, are you doing okay? I'm like, I'm great.
Yeah.
I'm great, you know. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
You know, people are dying. They're like, nobody's dying.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
died.
Yeah.
But people were like, heat stroke.
Yeah.
People going past me on stretchers.
Space
I
blankets.
felt amazing.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
cool. It's very cool. Well, and I think, you know, like you said, you did 2 days of speed work. Did you do some hill work in there too?
I did do hill work because Boston is a very hilly race.
Yeah.
So,
And then for strength training, what kind of exercises did you do for strength training?
I do a lot of core work,
Okay.
trying to do. We set goals at the beginning of the school year with our kids and with each other, and one of my goals has been to be able to do a pull up.
Yeah, man.
A pull up.
That's
Yeah.
all that
I haven't been
matters.
able to do a pull up since junior high,
Yeah.
and I still can't do a pull up.
Oh, well, I can
I've
help
worked
you with
it,
that.
but I'm not there yet.
I can help you with that.
Oh, yeah.
But
We'll
you
get you
were
there.
working on upper body strength and core strength and lat strength. And so, you know, we talked about squats, we talked about deadlifts, we talked about presses and just doing some of those, you know, lunges, weighted step ups, weighted carries, all those different things that are just planks. Planks are fantastic. Weighted planks are good too. But we talked about those things to implement to build your, you know, the movement starts from the inside out. You know what I mean? We talk about from center, you know, to extremity, from core to extremity. And so you can't have really good extremity movement, which is running, if you don't have a strong core. You know, a lot of people do it, but they just do it, you know,
Yes.
by circumstance.
Yes. Core is essential. But I always do, you know, walking lunges,
Yeah.
squats. I started lifting a little heavier with
Yeah,
squats.
I know. We talked about that.
And, you know, a lot of work on my calves
yeah.
because
Yeah,
I
cool.
started having some Achilles.
You had
issues.
some tendon issues, I
Yeah.
remember.
And that was after I had done a trail marathon leading up to last year's Boston.
Yeah.
3 weeks before I did a trail marathon.
Wow.
And my fastest ever trail marathon. I came in at like 3:56 or something.
Wow. That's awesome.
And then I started having this Achilles problem.
Yeah, a lot less predictable stride length and foot position in a trail marathon. You can over dorsiflex. You know, you can overextend over dorsiflex. You can put your foot in some positions that you got to have really good tendon strength and flexibility, but really good elasticity. And as we get older, we know our connective tissue doesn't stretch. It likes to stretch and then pop
Yes.
and break. So we wanted to make sure you didn't do that. So, but
So
yeah, very cool.
How often were you lifting each week?
Probably a couple of days, 2 or 3 days a week, I would lift.
Okay, so you did.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 2 or 3 days of strength training, and would you run on those same days as well?
I ran every day
Every day.
except
Okay,
for Sunday. I had one rest day.
gotcha. Okay, and you said of those running days, 2 to 3 days would be speed days.
2 days would be speed days, and those days may or may not coincide with the days that I'm lifting.
Gotcha. Okay.
So-
Okay. And so the other days that you were running, you were just putting in miles. How does that work? Do you go progressively? Do you try to add overall mileage from week to week, or just add miles to your long run?
So it's interesting. This program I started doing, the premise that it's based on is progressive fatigue.
Okay.
And so, whereas with previous marathons, I might do for my long run a 22 or 24 mile run, which is almost doing a marathon.
Right. Right.
My longest run in this training program was 18 miles.
That's awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
And actually, that was 2 miles longer than what the program actually asked for.
Did you just
which
do
was
that because you're
16.
mental?
Yes.
That's what I thought. I knew that was the answer to that because I kind of know her personality. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would do, you know, that's
You thought that's just not long enough?
right. I would do that 16-mile run the day after doing a 10-mile run, the day
okay.
after doing a 12-mile tempo run.
So from week to week, your fatigue was accumulating, even though your top mileage in a given run was not near what the total marathon mileage would be.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So that 16 miles felt like the last 16 miles of a marathon instead of the first 16 miles.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. So you're just training that ability to operate under fatigue, basically. Okay.
She also probably had a much better strength base, which lends itself to being able to produce more force. And when you can produce more force, Force is equal to mass times acceleration. So it's your ability to accelerate your body mass forward, okay, right? Your body weight forward. So you just had a stronger strength base, which makes each individual step, when you think about it, or each individual propulsion forward, a lower percentage of your overall strength capacity, which from a physics standpoint sounds great on paper. Now, obviously, that's also got to be combined with the appropriate time on your feet, learning how to train for a marathon. We've talked about this in an endurance episode, that sometimes your skin and your body just needs time doing some of those things. Getting your feet ready, getting your inner thighs ready, getting under your arms. How do you train? What clothes do you wear? How do you hydrate? How do you fuel, like you're talking about? So there's some other things that are more skill and technique oriented, but also there are some things that it does require some time when you're running that kind of distance. You can't just go out and run a 5K and then expect to go crush a marathon. It's just not going to happen. You got to do some distance. But what I like hearing is, number one, you were healthier. Number two, you felt amazing. And number three, you're older than you've ever been. You ran the fastest time of your life in that race. And we talked about this. You were dealing with some injuries that you had before, and you didn't have a problem with those things. And so it makes me wonder, what next year? Are you going to do one? You're already qualified for next year, right? You're pre-qualified for the Boston for next year.
Yes.
Because of your time. So you're going to run it next year?
I think so.
Yeah. I bet you do. I bet you cannot not do it. I mean, who wouldn't do it, But now you got to beat this year's time.
That's a lot. That's a big ask right there. What if it's 30 degrees again and raining the whole time?
Hey.
Well, the interesting thing that I've learned with training is that you have to tax yourself in all different ways.
Yeah.
If you want to be adequately trained for the situation. So a lot of the people who were struggling, because it got up to at the midpoint of the race, the clouds went away and the sun came out, and it got up in the low 70s, which is not hot. But when you're running a distance event, that's pretty warm. And there were people passing out and on stretchers and getting heat stroke and heat exhaustion and dropping out of the race. And I was like, man, I kind of wish those clouds would come back.
Yeah.
But I wasn't struggling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was because I had done, I'm a morning runner. I like to get up. When I'm doing a long run, I might get up at 4 a.m. and go run for 3 or 4 hours. But I was working mornings and had to be at work at 7, so that wasn't going to happen for me. So I would come home at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and go out for a run.
Sure.
And in April or in March in Texas, it's highly likely that your temperatures could be up in the 80s at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
So I had done some heat acclimation already because I had been doing those afternoon runs. And even some of my my sprint work in the afternoon runs.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, I mean, the preparation was definitely there. I think overall what you presented is that you had a well-rounded program. You did a comparable mileage. Y'all were talking about that. You did a comparable mileage. You restructured those miles to where some of those miles were done more in speed work, or some of that time was done more in speed work, dynamic power, in some of the areas that we need for racing. I mean, we did it you did some of that training also, some of that time in strength work, which you need for racing. You need to be a little bit stronger athlete. The problem when you start to talk about the running community about strength training is you think they're trying to make them look like, someone who's big and muscular, and that's not the idea.
Right.
If I get a runner into our gym that wants to do some strength training, I'm really just thinking about squats and deadlifts, and maybe the occasional Metcon training, and maybe a little bit of upper body training, probably just to press.
Yeah,
maybe.
just to press. Reinforce that trunk strength.
Press and chins and push-ups and mostly body weight stuff in that area, but presses with the barbell.
Right.
But what I'm really trying to do is build their hips. Build the hip.
Yeah.
Build the core. We're talking about the hips. We're talking about the hip flexors, the extensors, the abductors, the abdominal wall, the back extensors. Because, your back can go out in a run. Your back gets tired and fatigued. And so all of those things, when we're doing strength training, we're really just trying to create a stronger, more efficient machine. And at the same time, help them be aware that we're not going to make them heavy and bulky. We're going to make them reasonably more enduring and actually make the work easier for them. And that's the goal. That's the goal behind strength training. So do you think for this next year, when you're training for this next year, are you going to do a strength program?
Definitely.
Yeah, good. So I might want to program your strength workouts.
I would love that.
I would love to do that and us play with that early in your training. The Boston is in March, right? It's in April.
Okay.
So do a fall strength training cycle before you get way into your mileage, and then just do, I hate to use the term maintenance, but do more of a maintenance strength program while you're in your heavier mileage, just to keep your strength base, your foundation. You lose your top tier strength. You're going to lose that. But what you won't lose is this really good basic foundation of more strength than the average runner.
Yeah, we've talked about that when you observe the top-level CrossFit athletes that have to operate in a huge variety of domains, right? They've got to be strong, they've got to be crazy fit for endurance, and they have to be...
They did a triathlon in several of the last year's competitions. They did a triathlon.
Yeah. And
they did Murph, which is... for most of those guys, it's like a 30, 40-minute domain.
Yeah.
But it's not just your normal endurance event. It's with weights and with,
And then you see some of those guys do a deadlift ladder, and, the top lift is 600 pounds.
Yeah. It's crazy.
But we see, in general, a lot of those guys train in blocks where they have a strength training block, the furthest out from the competition, and then they start building their conditioning base. And then as they start tapering off that top tier strength they've built, they start working the skill movements as well. So they're prepared in all areas. So I want to go back to what the strength training might be doing with your cardiovascular fitness. Do you think that there's something about training in that ATP phosphocreatine energy pathway that you get with strength training that helps the that longer oxidative pathway that you use when you're running 18 miles? Because, we talk about when we strength train, we know that even though we're training primarily in those shorter term energy pathways, we do upregulate the oxidative pathway. So we get a little bit of a conditioning effect. Obviously not nearly enough to go out and run a marathon, but we know there is some upregulation. And I'm wondering if you think that some of the strength training that you did helped prepare you in a way that just running wouldn't have from a cardiovascular fitness aspect.
I definitely think cardiovascularly, there seems to be more power. I can't think of a better way to say it.
No, that's exactly. Yeah. The ability to kick.
Yes.
The ability to kick, to accelerate. Let's say you want to move out of the pack. You want to slightly increase your speed at that time, and you want to accelerate through something. Yes. Yeah, it's power.
Yeah. Okay. So, for example, in Boston, the last big hill in the Newton Hills is called Heartbreak Hill. And, people are lining the streets cheering for you. And that's like at mile 21, you hit this last hill, right? Oh, wow. And it's not like a giant hill or anything.
You got 5 more miles, though.
Well, I'm just like hitting the hills. I was trying to count them, but I kind of forgot how many there were. And anyway, so I got to the top of this last hill and I'm thinking, okay, one more. Heartbreak Hill's the next one. And then I saw a guy with a sign that said, "You did it, Heartbreak Hill." And I was like, that was it?
Like, wait.
Wow, that's awesome. Though. You're like, I crushed that hill. Sure. But you also have to admit, though, one of the things that does is really what it did to your mental mindset.
Oh, yeah.
It probably gave you a huge boost of confidence to know, wow, I just blew through that hill, and that's the hard one.
Yeah.
And I'm almost done with this race. I just need to finish strong. I just need to keep my pace, and I'm almost done with this race. I think I was talking to a younger lifter last night, a female in our gym. She has tried for 4 previous training sessions to hit a triple at a particular deadlift weight for 4 previous training sessions, and she has failed all 4 sessions to get the last rep on both the sets. She's doing 2 sets of 3 at a particular weight, and she would get 2 sets 2, 2 sets 2, 2 sets 2, 2 sets 2. And she's kind of been training inconsistently, so there's a long story here, but I don't do her programming necessarily. But she came in last night, and she was like, "Okay, coach, what do you think I should do?" And I said, well, I've watched your deadlift, and I've watched your speed off the floor, and your bar speed. And there is no reason in my mind and with my coaching experience that you shouldn't be getting 2 sets of 3 and blow through this weight and get a PR and then continue to PR for about another 2 or 3 weeks. it's in your head. It's all in your head. It's your lack of confidence. You've built a paradigm mentally and psychologically that says, I can't get the third rep. And you've done it 4 different times. So that's a problem in and of itself. When I'm coaching most normal lifters in my gym, I won't let them do that because that's a sense of failure that they start to believe. I got to change something up. Usually after the second session of not hitting the load, I'm going to change something up on them. We're going to move in a different direction. Number one, for their physical, but also for their mental status. And so, but I said, I really think you just need to blow through this tonight. Just do exactly what I tell you to do on the lift, and you're going to blow through these. What'd she do? 2 sets of 3. And it was easy.
Yeah.
The bar speed was fast. I've got it on video. Everything was fast. We corrected what was wrong with her pull, and she just blew right through it. And she was like, God, that felt so easy. I was like, yeah, but you know what you've done to your mind now is you've convinced your mind. You've built some confidence that when I have failed at something, that if I just try a little bit harder, and if I tweak some things here and there, I'm going to be able to blow through it. Well, I think that's what doing what you did that's what that does for you. When you train in a manner and you're well prepared, and then you have something like that happen that you don't expect. Like it happens to us sometimes when we're lifting and we misload the bar, and we load the bar with about 10 more pounds than we thought it was, but we thought the weight that we were actually doing was hard to start with, or maybe a fail rep anyway in our set, and we just blow through it and we're like, wow, that was awesome. And then your coach tells you, yeah, it was 10 pounds heavier.
Yeah, right. The worst is when you misload it the other way.
Yeah, exactly.
You think, wow, that was so heavy.
And then you realize you got to put 10 more pounds in the bar. But right. I think this just goes to show you that the mind is a very powerful tool.
Yeah.
And I think that you blowing through that hill, you basically said to yourself, wow, that really didn't feel that hard. I've got the rest of this race to run, and let's just get it done kind of thing.
Honestly, the hardest part of that race was the last... It was probably at mile 25 when everybody around me started walking.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then I was like...
Why am I not walking too?
Yes. They're walking. I could probably walk for a few steps. No, I'm not going to walk. Just keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah, and look what you did with your time. You just crushed it.
And, I think walking is, even more than mentally, it's physically more painful.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's much more efficient to run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you're running slow.
Even if you're really running slow. But honestly, I think running faster is less prone to injury.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I tried to focus a little bit more on my cadence,
mm-hmm.
And keeping that kind of 85 to 90 cycles per minute.
More of a pose running type model, midfoot striking, not landing on the heel as much. That probably helped your Achilles too. A little bit more forward lean, a little faster cadence. Yeah,
so even on the hills, I'd say same cadence, shorter stride, same cadence, shorter. I just have this mantra going in my head.
Yeah.
Keep your cadence,
Yeah. I wonder, do you have kind of music in your head that's playing at the right tempo? Do you have a song that just kind of helps you get in the zone?
Did you listen to music?
I had my iPod with me, but honestly, the crowds are so loud the entire race, you can't even hear it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you have to stay pretty focused then.
Yeah. But yeah, I do have something that kind of goes in my head, but I'm not going to share it because it's really embarrassing.
All right.
Is it ABBA?
No.
we got to pull this out of her. She's probably got her own little song.
We'll post it in the show notes. We'll figure it out and post it in the show notes.
Yeah. So, but you've got all the, obviously everything you did for this last race was just right on. And I know that your situation isn't always perfect too. You juggle, you were juggling being a physical therapist for us. You were juggling being a mom with 4 kids. I know your kids go all different direction with sporting events and school activities. You and I have talked about that, and you're very involved. You go to everything. Then you guys have this great recreational lifestyle on the side too. And so I know that nothing is ever perfect. So what would you say to someone that's older, that's in their 40s or above, that wants to get into endurance type events? And what's some advice that you could give them to start with?
Well, it's interesting because being in Texas, there's not a lot of outdoors sort of mentality like there is in other places where I've lived.
Sure.
And I have mainly, because we kind of live in a more isolated part of the DFW area,
yeah.
I do most of my training alone.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I'm almost always alone.
Yeah.
So, but I've actually over the last few years converted two of my less active friends.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And gotten them to run. And actually, I coached one of them through her first marathon last fall.
Oh,
that's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
And she's actually lost like 60 pounds
Oh, fantastic.
since she started hanging out with me. So
Awesome.
So my main thing is a lot of people think I'm not a runner. And I just tell them, if you run, you're a runner.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're running 13-minute miles or if you're running 5-minute miles. You're a runner.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just that mental, where you're coming from mentally. And then, just work into it. You don't have to go out and run a 5K. You don't have to go out and run a mile.
Yeah.
After I would have each of my kids, I ran, before I started running like marathons. But I would go out and I would say, okay, I'm going to run. I lived in a smaller neighborhood, smaller lot neighborhood at that point. And I would just say, I'm going to run till the next block. And then I'll walk till the next block. And then I'll run to the next block because I felt like my guts were falling out.
Yeah.
But, so, and then the next time I ran, I would run 2 blocks and then walk a block, So, just do something.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're describing is progressive overload.
Yes.
I mean, it's what you're really describing.
Yeah.
And I think with running, that principle holds true too, just like it does with strength training. It's progressive overload of cardiovascular activities or endurance activities. And I think that's excellent advice. I think you have to start out at some place. And to some people, they can't think of a 5K. We experience this with our patients. They can't think of doing something that we know they're eventually going to do in their treatment program. So we start out with the little steps, baby steps, And so I think that people can do that and they can reach the goals that they want to reach, but they got to start out really small and have micro goals and work towards the bigger goals. And then at some point they kind of look back and they go, holy cow, look where I've come from. This is probably like your friend that's lost 60 pounds. She probably looks back and she goes, I don't even remember that person.
Yeah.
I remember that person enough to not want to be that person again.
Yeah. We've been friends now for probably 8 or 9 years. And so pictures of us keep coming up on Time Hop.
Yeah.
And I don't even recognize her anymore. Wow. I'm like, who is that person? It doesn't even look like you anymore.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. If I were going to give someone any piece of advice about any exercise endeavor, it would be first, and you probably did it kind of the opposite, but I think that's fine too. You've gotten more into strength training, but I would say if you're an older person in your 40s and you want to get back into some type of endeavor, whether it be running events, endurance events, strength events, whatever, get a strength foundation. We know that the risk to injury is going to be lower if you start a basic, maybe walk, jog program, and then go do some strength training. Go do some strength training along the way to get your connective tissue ready, especially if you're overweight and you need to lose weight. If you're 100 pounds overweight, don't go out and start jogging. Let's work on your diet, your nutrition, some low impact activities. Let's do some strength training. Let's increase your lean mass, and let's slowly but surely get you where your weight is coming down so that when we start you into a jogging or a running program, you have less mass to handle for joint protection. And then get after it, and do some, like you said, do some intervals. That's one of the things I preach all the time now with my endurance athletes is 1 day a week of intervals, 1 day a week of maybe hill work or strength-oriented work that's running. Maybe it's a mid-distance, and then you get 1 long day on the weekend, for people that are running 5Ks, 10Ks, even half marathons, things like that. But and then mix up some strength training along the way in there. Yeah. And so, it's good advice.
Yeah, I definitely feel it when I'm not doing the strength training like I should be in the middle of the program.
Yeah. You feel less able, less tolerant to the stresses?
Yeah, the more joint pain because I do kind of a more natural running form.
Yeah.
I was barefoot running for a long time.
Oh,
and
cool.
So you're taking the strain with your muscles, not so much with your joints.
Yeah.
And so you've got to have that strength and that power there, or you're going to get injured.
Yeah. No, that's a great. Yeah, you've reduced the heel striking, and you're really just kind of. It's just I say it's the chug.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing that those runners do. They just pass you by going like it. I mean, your average was what did we say? What did we figure your average was that day? That day I talked to you about your average mile in this last rate was 8. Was it 8:17 or?
I was trying to keep my pace around 8. There were
Yeah.
a few miles where I had to slow down, where I had to tell myself to slow down because I was.
I mean, we could do the math on it, but I'm not a math magician. I'm not going to do that right now. But I think you ended up in like the low 8s average, which is fast. I mean, there's a lot of people that can't run a 5K in 24 minutes. You know, that's an 8-minute mile average.
Right.
So that's really fast for a marathon. How did you rank in your class? Do you remember?
I was in the top 10%.
Yeah, I was going to say you're
Yeah.
probably in the top 90th percentile, so really top in
Yeah.
the top there. That's cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
See, she really doesn't. She doesn't look at the kudos, the awards things. I'd be going, I was in the top 10%.
Well, you know, some of the smaller marathons I've run, I've actually placed.
Yeah.
And like won prizes. I even won money in a race.
Sweet.
So
right.
I'm like a professional runner now.
Hey, rock on.
I like it. Well, I'm curious, you know, since you said you train alone often, is running kind of your time for you to just block the world out and just kind of, you know, they say like in meditation, right? Be in the present moment. Is that what that time is for you?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Get a time away from the family, with the kids, do something for yourself.
I'm a much better wife and mother and everything when I'm able to train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So it's almost like, you know, the how you actually place or perform at these races. That's great, but it's really the process. It seems like for you, that's the really important thing. That's where you seem to value is just the process of training and doing.
It's an addiction, really.
Yeah.
I mean, when you've already run like 8 miles that day and then you see someone else running later and you're like, man, I wish I was running. That's when you know you have a problem.
Oh yeah. Right.
Well,
right.
it's the same with.
We get it as lifters. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
the same with people who lift a lot, or when I used to CrossFit more. It's, you know, I'd do a crushing CrossFit workout in the morning, and then I would go coach the evening class or the 3 evening classes at one of our gym, and at the very last class, there might only be a handful of members in the class that say, "Hey, Coach D, do the WOD with us, do the workout with us." I'd be like, "No, yeah." I'd be like, "Oh, okay." I mean, I've already worked out that day,
Right,
But you just it's exercise. And expressing ourselves physically like that, there are a lot of things that happen psychologically, emotionally, but it's addicting. Our bodies get used to those chemicals that we produce too. And like you said, I think there's a lot of value in what the process, and there's a lot of value in what happens to you as a person through the process of training for one of these events.
Right.
You do a lot of voluntary hardship. You do some things that you don't always want to do, but you know it needs to be done. And there's a lot of good personal skills that are developed during that time in your life, especially when you have a busy life like you do. So I'm the same way. I'll come up to the gym when no one else is training and get my training in, even when I feel cruddy, but I'm going to get my training in. Why? Because it's just what I do.
Yeah.
And when I get done with it, what do we all say? What do we all say when we get done with it? That was good.
Yeah,
Or it was a
better.
terrible training session, but I'm glad I still did it.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
It's just kind of that feeling you have when you get done.
I think it's interesting. I think that's a recurring theme we talk about on the podcast a lot. And we notice it. It's not just lifters. It's not just runners. It's pretty much anyone who achieves any sort of mastery at a physical skill. They all love the process. Like the great athletes, it's not about the touchdowns. It's not about the home runs or whatever it is. It's always about just that process of self-improvement. There's something addicting about the process itself, which is interesting. And it's interesting that it doesn't matter what discipline you look at in the fitness world. That's one commonality is the people who are successful long term and stick with it are the ones who fall in love with the process.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have talked about this. We actually like the technical skill set of learning how to lift better.
Right. I could look at,
and you probably actually like the technical skill set of learning how to improve your run, the actual technique of it. So.
But I also like learning how to lift better.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
She
Absolutely.
threw that in for Coach D for me. But she does, because actually she's been coming to some classes we've been doing. So
Fantastic.
so for our PTs. So
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, thanks for joining the show. Thanks for being on.
you want to
Thanks for
add
having
anything?
me.
You want to add anything about just fit over 40 and how you feel? You feeling good?
I'm feeling good. I've got a couple big projects coming up.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
planning my first 50K this
Oh,
fall.
Right.
wow.
Nice,
And then I've
nice.
got-
Ultra. Holy
I've got
cow.
my eye on a 50-mile trail run
sweet.
in the
That's
spring. So
That's
Very
awesome.
nice.
So
we'll see.
you know those runners do a lot of strength training. From what I've read, they do a lot of strength training. I know a guy that does that stuff and eats hamburgers as he's running along.
It's an eating contest.
I know he eats a whole hamburger.
You're running between like eating contests.
You know what
Yeah.
an ultra marathon's like? Everybody lines up to the starting line. They get in their starting position. They get down like they're about to start off, and then the gun goes off, bam, and everybody goes and stands up and starts jugging.
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
It's totally true.
They just start barely moving.
Anticlimactic.
But when you think about how fast some of these runners run, I've followed several guys that are like guys in their 40s and 50s that are ultra marathoners, but they're crazy fit and crazy muscled up. One of them is a primal hunter too. He does a lot of bow hunting and archery hunting up in Montana and Oregon and Colorado and some of those areas. But this guy is jacked and he runs ultras.
Yeah.
You know?
It's definitely a different mindset.
Yeah.
The people are totally different. You don't see the scrawny people
No.
like you do in road races. Even at the top levels, they're not like that. They're much more muscular.
Yeah.
And especially when you get in the mountain running community,
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, they're very
That's interesting.
legs are muscled up, and but like I said, I followed a guy for a while, and he was talking about how he was eating cheeseburgers on the way, and
you got to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
I mean, some people they will eat the crazy things. They
Yeah.
have, the aid stations instead of having gels, they have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and pickles and potato chips and M&Ms and that kind of thing. And you just have to figure out what
you
works
got to
for
get
you.
some whole foods.
Okay,
in
so
Yeah.
I'm not sold on the marathon, but you might have just sold me on the 50 miler.
Well, and the thing
It's
that
like M&Ms, and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Doesn't sound so bad.
the thing I absolutely love about the trail running community is how supportive they are of each other.
Yeah.
Like you go out, even just running at the local trails, I'll go out and be running and I'll see an older couple, and it's a lot of older people doing the trail
Yeah.
running.
Okay, yeah.
Older, and I mean like in their 60s. And they will stop and say, "Good job."
Yeah,
As I
yeah.
run past, "Good job."
Yeah,
And I'm like, "You guys must be trail runners, huh?"
Yeah.
yeah, that's funny. No, but that's cool. So though you got those two things coming up. So you'll do the 50K first, which is about 30 some odd miles. Is that
It's
right?
31.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would be exact. 5K would be 3.1, so it would be 31 miles. And then you have a 50 miler. Man, that's awesome.
Yeah. I've got a couple of shorter trail runs coming up at the end of the summer, but
Okay. Cool.
the 50K is in November. So.
Okay.
Is there somewhere we can follow your training online? Do you post on
I
Instagram? or-
actually have an Instagram.
Okay.
It's called Alaska Mountain Mother Runner.
All right, Alaska
That's
Mountain
easy
Mother
to
Runner.
remember. Alaska Mother Mountain Runner. All right. At Alaska Mountain Mother Runner.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's AKMTN Mother Runner.
Okay.
Okay,
AKMTN Mother Runner.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll post that in the show notes so you can follow Michelle and her exploits
Yes.
going
Yes.
forward.
Very cool.
See how the training goes.
And there's wake surfing on there too. So
Oh,
Well, wake surfing.
We gotta,
All right,
We got
nice.
to post some
I
wake
like to be
surfing
well
stuff.
rounded.
That's
you know?
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like it.
Well, man, it's been great having you, Michelle. It's always good. I love seeing what strength training, good quality fitness and lifestyles can do to people who are in our age group. You know, I'm in my 50s, you're in your 40s, and just how it makes our bodies look more youthful. You obviously look like an athlete. You act like an athlete. You're doing a great job for our clinics. We're going to miss you not being in our clinics for a while. I know you're going to cover some PRM work, but we'll get you back eventually too.
I'm sure.
For more work. But it's been great having you here. We'll follow you on Instagram. And it's great having you guys today on our podcast. And if you want to follow the 40 Fit Radio podcast, you can go to @40FitRadio on Instagram. You can go to @Dr. Deaton. I just changed it recently to Dr. Deaton.
Yeah, I noticed that. Dr. Deaton.
Yeah, just
used to
changed
be-
it recently. And so just make sure you make that change if you need to, or it should have made it automatically if you already follow me. Trent is @Marmalade Cream. We won't tell you the secret behind that. And
Someday.
you can go to info@40fit.com for email, and then you can go to 40fit.com and click on the 40Fit Radio tab for streaming the episodes. But go to iTunes and Stitcher. Give us a review if you get a chance. Let us know what topics you want to hear about. We love hearing topics like this that are, all things fitness, basically. All things fitness, health, and lifestyle for the over 40 population. And thanks for joining the 40 Fit Nation today.
Thanks, guys.